بسم الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه وبركاته عليه. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد فإن خير الكلام كلام الله جل في العلا وأحسن هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة كل ضلالة في النار. As we continue in the explanation of this tremendous beneficial treatise by the great illustrious Al-Imam Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah Ahmad ibn Abdul Halim Taqiyuddin Ahmad ibn Abdul Halim ibn Abdul Salam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, who died 728 after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. As we continue in this lesson, 7:13 p.m. Wednesday, June the 30th 2021, in accordance with the Gregorian calendar, which agrees with the Hijri calendar. I don't know if everyone has the 20th of the Qa'dah, but today is Wednesday, the evening of Wednesday, which is the 20th of the Qa'dah, if I'm not mistaken, everyone, correct me if I'm wrong, the year 1442, after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. As we continue in this beneficial treatise by the great Imam, if everyone looks in their books using Shaykh, our brother, our virtuous Ustadh Anwar Wright, if you look in his translation that he did, the Muqaddimah of the introduction, I think if I'm not mistaken, it's page 57. Page 57 in your books. You'll find that he mentioned, it says, that's one volunteer that one of the brothers read it. Read it for the Musa'ab, where I told you to start, inshallah. Tafaddal. Read with a loud, boisterous voice, because I like your deep voice. He has a real young face with a real deep voice.
As for the reason behind it?
Mm-hmm.
As for the reason behind this is their belief that these texts, i.e. the Quran and the Sunnah, do not point to the reality of any attributes based upon corrupt doubts, which they share with their
brothers. That's what it says. Does it say brothers? Brethren or brothers? Brethren. Mm-hmm.
For the disbelievers. So because they believe Allah attributes to be non-existent, along with the fact that these texts must carry a meaning, the waves behind.
I'm sorry.
Waver.
No.
Waver behind.
Mm-hmm.
Between having belief imam in the attributes and claiming to entrust the knowledge of this meaning to Allah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So which they enormously claim to be the way of the Salaf. In between this distorting the attributes to other meanings, using somewhat burdensome methods. And this is what they call the way of the Khalaf. As a result, this falsehood became a mixture of corrupt reasoning along with negation of the text. This is because in their negation of Allah's attributes, they related upon intellectual arguments, which they thought to be manifest proof, but in reality were only doubts. At the same time, they distorted the verses of the Quran from their proper context.
G. Read it for me again, Sabir. Start from the beginning, 57.
And the reason behind this is their belief that these texts, the Quran and Sunnah, do not point to the reality of any attribute, based upon corrupt doubts which they share with their brethren from the disbelievers. So because they believe Allah's attributes to be non-existent, along with the fact that these texts must carry a meaning, they wavered between having belief, iman, in the attribute and claiming to entrust the knowledge of its meaning to Allah, tafweed, which they erroneously claimed to be the way of the Salaf, and between distorting the attribute to other meanings using somewhat burdensome methods, and this is what they call the way of the Khalaf. As a result, this falsehood became a mixture of corrupt reasoning along with negation of the text. This is because in their negation of Allah's attributes, they relied upon intellectual arguments, which they thought to be manifest proofs, but in reality were only doubts. And at the same time, they distorted the verses of the Quran from their proper context.
طيب, your father, Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, as we mentioned last class, notice that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, he continues to elaborate in this tremendous work, bringing a lot of principles and enlightenment to the proper methodology in regards to our position from the affirmation of Allah's attributes, His names, His beautiful names, and His lofty attributes. He was laying down another principle of why the people went astray in regards to the correct position. When we say correct position, we mean the position, number one, of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, and what he taught his companions, because that is the correct position. With the position in which he was upon alayhi salatu wasalam, and what he taught the companions, and what the companions taught the tabi'een, and those who followed them, who came after the tabi'een, who's called the atba' tabi'een, as we know. You'll find the reason of why they went astray. Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah is clarifying this in these lines. What was the reason? Notice he says in the beginning, he said, وَسَبَبُ ذَلِكَ اعتقادهم أنه ليس في نفس الأمر صفة دلت عليها هذه النصوص. He said the reason for that belief, meaning the corrupt and correct belief in regards to the names and attributes of Allah. He said, for verily in that affair, if you look in your books, like I said, it's going to be a slight word between me and what Fadilat al-Ustadina. I know what he says, but the meaning more likely is mutaqarib, it's close. He said that the reason for that is that in the exact affair, there isn't any characteristic that is affirmed or substantiated by the nusus, by the text, meaning the text of what? The text which comes in the book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said there is no evidences and proofs that indicates that, meaning what Allah affirms for Himself, or what the Messenger of Allah ﷺ affirmed for Allah. He said they say there's no text, there's no evidence for what you say, meaning when you are upon, O people of the Sunnah, or the O people who claim to follow the Messenger of Allah. You have nothing of evidence. You have nothing of evidence or proof. Right, so then he goes on to say, the shubahat al-fasida. He said the reason for also why they say this, why they verbalize this, what's the reason? He said due to corrupt ambiguities, doubtful matters, in which they shared in, along with that, their brothers, or their brethren, as it says in your books, from the disbelievers. This is what we said last class. What is he speaking about? We're going to mention that in a minute. Who are these groups and who are their brothers? Who are they? Who are these groups? What are their names? And who are their brothers who they share? We'll talk about that in a minute. So وَكَانَ مَعْ ذَلِكَ لَابُدَّ لِلنُّصُوصِ مِنْ مَعْنًى بَقُوا مُتَرَدِّدِينَ بَيْنَ الْإِيمَانِ بِاللَّفْظِ وَتَفْوِيضِ الْمَعْنَى. He said, then, he said, I'm sorry, I skipped something. فَلَمَّا اعْتَقَدُوا انْتِفَاءَ الصِّفَاتِ فِي النَّفْسِ الْأَمْرِ. He said, for now, when they firmly believe, because of these doubtful matters, when these doubtful matters penetrated their heart and corrupted their firm belief or the correct belief, what came as a result of it is negating these attributes for Allah. Negating what Allah has affirmed for Himself. Negating these attributes, and at the same time, of course, he says, at the same time, they say they have to now twist the text from the Kitab and Sunnah. So they twist the text, bringing meanings, of course. What came also as a result of it, they remain mutaraddidin. He said they remain now in a state where they're wavering. They're wavering between what they now so-called have belief in the word that they see in the Quran or the Sunnah, and at the same time, they fell into a misguidance, which is saying that we entrust it to Allah. All this I'm going to clarify and make it clear. Don't worry. So let's just stop right there and dissect it, because we don't keep reading, and the more I read, I think certain people are going to get confused. Fine. So let's go back to the beginning. So your father, Shaykh al-Islam, is saying why certain individuals have distorted beliefs or corrupt beliefs in regards to the names and attributes of Allah. So he's saying that the people of falsehood, we're going to mention who they are specifically by name, they believe that what? There's no text in Kitab al-Sunnah that's an evidence that you can rely upon, O people of the Sunnah or people that follow the Salaf. You haven't any. The Shaykh al-Islam is saying this is due to corrupt, doubtful matters that have penetrated their heart, has poisoned their heart and their understandings, in which they participated in that along with their brothers from the disbelievers. So let's stop there. You'll find that Shaykh al-Islam is mentioning the devious sects who have been affected and corrupted. At the head of them is called the Jahmiyyah. The followers of Jahm ibn Safwan, Ibn Abu Mihriz al-Rasibi. His name was Jahm ibn Safwan, Abu Mihriz al-Rasibi. So those are the first groups that he's speaking about, that say you have no text in Kitab and Sunnah that substantiates your beliefs, O people of Sunnah. You don't have anything. So the first people that have been poisoned, that Shaykh al-Islam is speaking about, is the Jahmiyyah. The Jahmiyyah are those who do not affirm for Allah anything whatsoever of the attributes of Allah. They don't affirm anything. Not the names, not the attributes. Rather, the only thing they affirm for Allah is an existence of the mind. That's the only thing they affirm for Allah to be with that. They call it wujud al-dhihn, the existence of the mind, meaning inside the mind, in someone's, in your head, in your way of thinking. To them, that's the only real existence of Allah to be with that. So just follow what I'm saying. So the Jahmiyyah, ya ma'ashar al-ikhwa, as we said, They don't affirm anything for Allah ta'ala. Not the names, not the attributes. The only thing they affirm for Him subhanahu is an existence of the mind. An existence of the mind. They say that Allah ta'ala has no existence outside the mind. Meaning Allah ta'ala is not above the heavens. He's not above the heavens. All of this is mere rhetoric. There's no reality to it. That's what they say. So that's the first group that Shaykh al-Islam is speaking about. So the person, when they imagine in their mind, this is their so-called existence of Allah. As for outside of it, Allah ta'ala has no existence. And for that reason, you'll find generally that the Jahmiyyah are not counted from the sects that are ascribed to Islam, meaning that they're in the fold of it. That they're inside the fold of Islam. Due to this high level, or this great magnitude of disbelief. Rather, they are outside of that. The followers of who everyone? Of Jahm ibn Safwan. And you'll find, Ya Ma'ashar al-Ikhwa, that this deviant sect goes back, or rather you'll find that the chain of this particular evil sect goes back to disbelief. You'll find that Jahm ibn Safwan, he's the one, of course, in which his belief became famous. He's the founder. But if you look to the chain of those who taught him these ideologies, for example, before him was an individual named Ja'd ibn Dirham. Ja'd ibn Dirham is minhum. Ja'd ibn Dirham, who preceded Jahm ibn Safwan, rather he was the one that taught Jahm ibn Safwan. His Shaykh was Ja'd ibn Dirham. Ja'd ibn Dirham was taught by an individual named Talut. Talut was taught by an individual named Labid ibn al-A'sam. And he was a Jew who was accused of committing and performing magic upon the Prophet ﷺ. Labid ibn al-A'sam, the Jew who did and practiced magic until the magic affected the Messenger of Allah ﷺ in his body, not in the revelation. That's the reason why I'm saying that. Because some of the people, even to today, still use this as a way to now cause some doubt in regards to the revelation. You'll find certain individuals who are upon the methodology of the Shia. They'll say that the Messenger of Allah was affected as far as with magic, utilizing to say that that's a reason that it's what? Susceptible to doubt. You'll find that Al-Ilm come and refute this years ago. They said the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was affected in his body, of course, not in the revelation. The revelation is protected. But Allah Ta'ala allowed them, His Messenger, to be tested with that. And Allah knows best in order for what? To one to come with a remedy to legislatively show how one can what? Treat themselves. And also we know that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was tested with great trials in order for his degree to be raised higher and higher in the hereafter. But for that reason, you'll find that this isnad, which is aswad, min ashad al-dhalam, or ashad al-dhulumat, you'll find that this black chain, which you'll find from the greatest of deviant sects, where their deviance was so what? Extreme to the point that you'll find that they say statements that is totally what? That is totally baseless. And it's on a high level of disbelief. Like we said, Jahm ibn Safwan was the head of the Jahmiyyah. And like we said, the chain goes back to Ja'd ibn Dirham. Ja'd ibn Dirham was taught by Talut. Talut was taught by Labid ibn al-A'sam, al-Yahudi, who did magic upon the Prophet ﷺ. So you'll find that this sect, who was from the heads of those who were engrossed in the knowledge of what they call ilm al-kalam wal-falsafa, the knowledge of so-called philosophy, that they were what? Affected by. At the head of them was this sect. Like we said, if you look to what happened, they negated the outside existence of Allah, as they say, until they only affirm for Allah ta'ala existence of the mind, which is nothing except what? Mere falsehood. And rather it's the highest form of falsehood that you ascribe to Allah ta'ala, this type of affair. So that's what Shaykh al-Islam, from those sects, if you look in your books, that's who he's speaking about now. He's talking about the Jahmiyyah, in which, like we said, those who negated the names and the attributes of Allah ta'ala and only affirm for Him, like we said, the existence of the mind. The second group you'll find that Shaykh al-Islam is speaking about in these lines is a second group who's also been affected by the logic, by, if you want to say, by Greek philosophy. So the first group from the Muslims who was affected by Greek philosophy was the Jahmiyyah. It's the Jahmiyyah. They were affected by Greek philosophy or Greek what? Rhetoric and logic. Is it clear, everyone? Keep in mind the atrocity that they fell into was relying upon al-aqliyat. They were relying upon what? So-called affairs connected with the intellect only. That's what they glorified and they gave precedence to over the revelation. So that was the secret of their misguidance. It emanated from this point here. This point here where what? Their reliance was upon the what? The intellect. Giving precedence and glorifying that over the revelation. Until they were what? Affected by Greek philosophy. At the head of them were who, everyone? The Jahmiyyah. The second group who were affected by Greek philosophy was who, everyone? The Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila and their aqidah and their belief that they believe in the names of Allah ta'ala, but they have no meanings to it. What they affirm for Allah ta'ala is what they call asma' jamida, la tadullu ala al-ma'ani. What they affirm for Allah ta'ala is they say solid names. What does it mean, solid names? Meaning, we affirm for Allah what He says in His book, of course, with these names, but they don't indicate any meaning. They're like solid names, or like solid, proper names. For example, someone's name is Zayd or Amr. Or for example, Zayd ibn Amr, or let's just say name Rahim. Rahim. Someone's name is Rahim. Someone can be, his name is Rahim, but he might not be a merciful individual. So it's like a name almost without a what? Without a meaning to it. That's what the Mu'tazila say. They're like solid names. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, has the name of Al-Alim or Sami' Al-Basir. For example, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all knowledgeable, it does not indicate knowledge. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all hearing, it does not indicate hearing. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all seeing, it does not indicate sight. That is the belief of the Mu'tazila in general. Don't worry. I'm going to go bit by bit. By the time we finish the book, inshallah, you'll have way more information than what we're speaking about now. But that's in summary to start with the dalalat or the misguidance of the Mu'tazila. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Jay, you with me? Right. So that's the second group of what we're speaking about now, the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila who affirm for Allah al-asma, walaka al-asma al-jamida. Solid names, they do not indicate what? Any meanings. They do not indicate what, everyone? Any meanings. So, as if their affirmation for the names of Allah is ithbat al-shaykh. It's affirming the what? The outside wording of it, but it doesn't indicate anything. So a person would say, or if the Mu'tazila would say, Alim, but he has no knowledge. Samir, or hearing without any hearing, and the likes of what we just mentioned. Is it clear, everyone? So those are the two groups in which Shaykh al-Islam is mentioning in these lines, but he didn't specify them by saying the names of them. But this is who he's speaking about. This is who he's intended. So after I read the explanation, you go over the lines again, now it'll become clear. So he's talking about number one is the Jahmiyyah, then what? The Mu'tazila. Then you'll find the other group that he's speaking about, which was the most dangerous because they resemble the people of the Sunnah or the people of the truth. And we know those who resemble them are the most dangerous out of fear that the people would think that they are the people of the truth even though they aren't. Right, everyone? So you'll find that al-khalaf al-akhir, or the last, you'll find that what Ahl al-Ilm say, in light of what the great Imam, Shaykh Muhammad Imam Jami, even what he says, rahimahullah, is the group called al-Asha'ira. Al-Asha'ira. And which you'll find that Shaykh al-Islam said about them in a lot, in his works. He said, min aqrabi tawa'if al-khalaf ila minhaj al-salaf. They are the closest of the deviant sects, meaning the deviant sects that have been affected by logic and philosophy. And he's talking about this relatively, not saying that they are the people of the truth or to show some type of sympathy. That's not where he's going with it. What Shaykh al-Islam is intended is that of what will manifest to the people, of what they would think. Relatively speaking, meaning in comparison to the people of the truth, the closest of those evil deviant sects are the Asha'ira. Relatively speaking, even though he's not saying that they are the people of the truth, but saying that their characteristics is the closest to the people of the truth, even though they're not from them. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Right. So it says, you'll find that a lot of places, and you'll find that the great Imam Muhammad Aman, he mentioned this. He's still going to come in and turn the EC on. It says, شَهِدَ لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ فِي غَيْرِ مَوْضِعٍ مِنْ كُتُبَهِ Shaykh al-Islam. In a lot of his works, Shaykh al-Islam testified to this fact, that a lot of them, of what we just mentioned, or what we just said, that the Asha'ira, who so-called claim they are followers or of Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, even though they don't. Because Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari retracted all of these affairs and what they ascribe or what they affirm him of having. You'll find in actuality they're called the Kullabiyah. The people who remained upon the misguidance of saying so-called Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, this is what he was upon, even though he was not. In actuality, they were upon of what Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari was prior before his Tawbah, which was the what? Which was the ideologies of Muhammad ibn Kullab, and which is a deviant sect called the Kullabiyah. So those who follow Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari and their so-called claim do not follow him. Rather, they follow the Kullabiyah. So they should be ascribed to him rather than Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, who the one who made repentance at the end of his life in which he died upon, rahimahullah. Is it clear, everyone? So that is the head of the Asha'ira, where Shaykh al-Islam said, relatively speaking, they are the closest to the people of the truth, even though they're not from them. Is it clear, everyone? Fine. Why? Because Shaykh al-Islam gathered with them. He also debated them. And Shaykh al-Islam studied their books. And Shaykh al-Islam studied books of logic and philosophy. Out of what? In order to refute their nonsense. And to refute their what? Falsehood. Not in order to what? Acquire speech and I'm curious. No. He studied their books because he wanted to use their rhetoric, looking for the misguidance that they believe, studying it, and then picking it apart and tearing it down with revelation. The issue with the Asha'ira, where they fell into misguidance, is they wanted to so-called, in their intent, combat the Mu'tazila. They wanted to combat the Mu'tazila, but they fell into the same affairs in which their so-called brothers fell into. Which is what? What did they fall into? Which is the exact same thing, which is reliance, kind of rhetorical right now, which is reliance upon the intellect. So what the Mu'tazila fell into, the reason for it was what? Giving glorification and giving precedence to the intellect. The Asha'ira also, their source or their misguidance stemmed from glorifying the intellect. So you cannot fight what? Fire with fire. So you'll find that even though they were so-called trying to rebuttal the Mu'tazila, they still what? Fell into error. Why? Because the same usul or foundations they were utilizing in order to debate them with were the same usul and foundations that the Mu'tazila were utilizing, in which came as a reason them falling into their misguidance. So you cannot fight fire with what? You can't not fight what? Falsehood what? You cannot do that. So it's clear, everyone? You cannot fight fire with fire, nor can you fight falsehood with falsehood, nor can you fight a mistake with another one. Ahsant. Is it clear? You cannot fight another mistake and follow with another mistake. And if people was to ponder on that, then a lot of our problems would be alleviated in this dunya. You cannot follow up or fight a mistake with another mistake. So-and-so killed my mother, I want to follow and kill his mother. Well, that's going to make anything better? Understand, everyone? You cannot fight a mistake with another mistake. You cannot combat racism with black nationality. You cannot fight white bigotry with black nationalism. It's fighting fire with fire and falsehood with falsehood, and misguidance with misguidance, and a mistake with another mistake. Is it clear, everyone? Is it clear? Jay. So that's what we mentioned and said. This is the reason why the Ash'ari, even though they so-called were trying to rebuttal the Mu'tazila, however, like we said, the foundations that they were utilizing were the same foundations they were utilizing. So then they were mistaken in that regard. They fell into this type of misguidance similar to them. So you find that Shaykh al-Islam said this about the Ash'ari, even though, like we said, he said they're not for the people of the truth. However, the misguidance of the Ash'ari was not like the misguidance of the Mu'tazila, in light of what we mentioned a couple of moments ago. You'll find that they do affirm some of the attributes of Allah. They do affirm some of the attributes of Allah, but that which they affirm, and they don't negate it. However, they distort its meaning. So they don't negate it. However, they come with another method, which is also incorrect, which is called ta'wil. But ta'wil, in the meaning of the Ash'ari, means distortion. It means distortion. Here, what they do in actuality is what? Distortion of the meaning. Meaning changing the meaning, taking it, what the meaning says, and putting another meaning in its place. That has no evidence from it, from Kitab, nor from the Sunnah. So that is the reason why you'll find that Shaykh al-Islam, he's intended these groups. So now let's read the lines again. Matter of fact, let me keep going just a little bit, then I'll read the text again. So just to give a little bit more explanation, just to sum it up, Shaykh al-Islam is speaking about who, everyone, in these lines? He's speaking about who? The Jahmiyyah. He's speaking about who? The Mu'tazila. And he's speaking about who? Al-Ash'ari. In actuality, we said that Al-Ash'ari should be, it's more appropriate that you call them what? Kullabiyah. Because that's what they're upon. Even though they ascribe themselves to Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, but the text or the history testifies against them. That their Shaykh, Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, is free with what they're upon. Rather, he made repentance. Is it clear? So that's what we mentioned. He says, this Khalaf, the so-called latter generation or later generation that came later on, in which Shaykh al-Islam was given an indication. He said that the reason for the misguidance is, they so-called say, there's no text or there's no characteristic of Allah in which the text can prove. And they say that is mentioning, or who he's speaking about, is those three groups that we just said, right, everyone? You'll find that they say in regards to these nusus, there's no evidence for it. Then you'll find that they say ثم اضطردوا وقالوا من الصفات ما يجب إثباتها على ظاهرها كما يليق بالله. He said the Ash'ari, they fell into what they call contradiction. So Shaykh al-Islam is saying that there's nothing in evidence in Kitab and Sunnah that points towards this so-called characteristic or characteristics that Allah affirms for Himself. Then you'll find that they contradicted each other. You'll find, if you look to their belief of the Ash'ari, that there are characteristics that in their claim, what they say, is obligatory for us to affirm, and that it remains upon its apparent meaning. So now you come with what? Distorting the meaning, and then in certain characteristics of Allah, you go back to the way of the Salaf, which is the correct way. So that's contradictive. So we'll talk about that in a minute, don't worry. You'll find that the Ash'ari, they come with one rule. That rule only applies to certain characteristics. Then you'll find that certain characteristics, they go back to what's correct. So in actuality, they're what? Contradicting themselves. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone?
Yes.
Jay. So that's what they say. They say from the characteristic, we have to, it's obligatory for us to affirm it for Allah because Allah affirmed it for himself. And keep it upon its apparent meaning in a manner that befits Allah. So they went back in certain characteristic to the correct position. So that's contradictory. The Ash'ari call those characteristics, which is correct, which they follow in that, the madhab al-salaf, they call those characteristics sifat al-ma'ani or sifat al-aqliyah. That's what they call it. They call it the characteristics that agree with the intellect. They call sifat al-aqliyah. Characteristics, they say, in which it's obligatory for us to distort the meaning. He's talking about the characteristics that they went astray in, not the characteristics in which they followed the truth in. Because you'll find that they gather between both ways. You'll find in certain characteristics, all this is going to come. We're going to get the details. I'm going to give it to you guys bit by bit, not in a whole, so everyone get confused. So, inshallah, bit by bit. Just know for sure that the Ash'ari are not like the what? The Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila, as far as what they come with, of plain, clear, unadulterated misguidance. The Ash'ari come with both. That's why you'll find why Shaykh al-Islam said what he said, that they're the closest to what? Of those sects who've been affected by Greek philosophy to the people of Sunnah. Why? Because there are characteristics they do affirm in which they do agree with the people of truth in, as far as in their position and as far as in how they affirm it for Allah and what the message of Allah also affirmed for Allah. However, what they fell into is what? Contradicted. Because in other characteristics of Allah, they what? They deviated, in which they come with another method called what? Distortion. Those characteristics that they distort is called as-sifat al-aqliyah. Characteristics that only an intellect affirm. Or they call it sifat al-ma'ani. Characteristics of what? Of meanings. In which they say it's obligatory that we have to distort its meaning and use another method in order for us to understand it properly. Is it clear, everyone? So you see why Shaykh al-Islam said what he said. Relatively speaking, the Ash'ari are closest, what? To the people of the truth in certain what? Characteristics. Not in what? Not in all of them. Is everyone with me so far or not? Yeah. Right, before I keep going, is there any questions? Or do I keep going? Right. Hence, what is obligatory that the nusus, the text, you'll find that we said that all what comes in the Kitab and Sunnah brings evidence and clear proof for the names and the attributes of Allah. So what they're saying is totally what? Incorrect. If you look to what Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, he said their belief or the reason for this type of evil belief is due to doubtful matters they adopted and affected their belief and affected their hearts, in which they shared along in that their brothers from the disbelievers. Who's the disbelievers, everyone? The philosophers, the Greek philosophers, such as Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, and the likes of them. He said in which they shared in their brothers, and they were what? They were disbelievers. Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and other than them. He said, due to them being affected by the concepts of Greek philosophy and logic, this is what entered upon them, and it came as a result of it, these type of ideologies that we've just been mentioning for the past half an hour, based upon what the Jahmiyyah believe or the Mu'tazila. And likewise what? The Ash'ari, where they gave glory to the intellect over the what? Revelation. Where when one combats falsehood, it's incumbent upon one to stick to what? Revelation. They refute truth. They refute falsehood by what? By the truth. They never combat falsehood with falsehood, or utilizing some type of method that opposes the truth when they want to so-called clarify it. You only combat falsehood with the truth. That's it. That's what Shaykh al-Islam was what? Mentioning here. He said when he was combating the so-called aqliyat, the affairs that only agree with the intellect, you combat it with what? Naqliyat, meaning affairs that are from Kitab and Sunnah. He said you combat aqliyat with what? Naqliyat. You rely on the naqliyat in order to combat the aqliyat. You rely on the text which comes in Kitab and Sunnah in order to refute the what? The evil which is called aqliyat, which is pertaining to the glorification of the intellect and the human mind. Because that is the what? The misguidance of the Greek philosophers. They used to give precedence and veneration to whatever you want, the human mind. To the text, to the human mind, to the intellect, the rational or so-called rationality. Everything could be rationalized by the mind. Everything is pertaining to the mind. Until you'll find, as we'll go on, inshallah, that the Mu'tazila started to negate affairs of the unseen, to try to rationalize it. There's no type of what? Affairs that are mysterious, meaning due to some influence that's unseen to us. Rather, all of it can be explained and everything has a rational what? Explanation to it. That's the reason why you'll find that they also deny the punishment of the grave, because they try to rationalize everything. So you'll find that Greek philosophy, what it led to, of misguidance, of deviation, and negation of a lot of what we affirm and believe, which is a main reason for rectification of society. So the people didn't believe in the hereafter, or there's a punishment in the grave. A lot of them would say, what's the reason why we should leave off or abandon evil? For what? Those things you guys are speaking about, there's no reality to it. Those are just bedtime stories. Those are just fairy tales. There's no reality to it. It's just allegorical, or it's metaphorical. It's irrational information to everything. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? So that's the reason why, like we said, the Mu'tazila, they glorified the what everyone, the aqliyat over the what? Naqliyat. Where every time you combat falsehood, you combat it with the what? The naql. Not the what? Aql. With the naql. With the revelation, not with the what? Not with the mind. The problem with the Mu'tazila, the Sha'ira, and the Jahmiyyah is that they what? They use the what? Jay. They use the mind. Fine. So those who Shaykh al-Islam speaking about, those who participated, meaning these groups, they shared along with their brothers or brethren, and those people who deviated from the Greek philosophers. He said, or you'll find that the great Imam, even Muhammad Ahmad Jami, said this. He said that it breaks down to two people who disbelievers. He said you'll find they're talking about the Greek philosophers. He said these people are disbelievers. He said, وَلَا فَلَاسِفَةٌ يَقُولُ فِيهِمْ بَعْضُ الْمُتَعَاطِفِينَ فَلَاسِفَةُ الْإِسْلَامِ. He said, then you have another group of philosophers in which people, so-called sympathetic people from the Muslims will say, oh, these are the philosophers of Islam. These are the Islamic philosophers. He said, where's the philosophy of Islam? Who are they? People of misguidance such as Ibn Sina, wal-Farabi, wal-Kindi, wa-amthaluhum. He said, people who are affected by them, by philosophy, such as Ibn Sina. And there's a country, from the Muslim countries, somebody can know who it is, that they really glorify, and I think it's in, it's in one of the countries, it's in one of the stands by China. I don't know which one, but they really glorify Ibn Sina. I don't know if it's because it's one of the stands by China. One of the stands. They call it, you have, I have a brother, alhamdulillah, we have a Salafi brother here who's from one of the countries. He even told me that. He said they glorify Ibn Sina in one of his countries. So it's one of those countries over there near China. It's like the neighbor country. I forgot which one it is right now. I can't remember it. But so at any rate, those who've been affected by philosophers that so-called ascribe themselves to Islam, such as who? Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi, and also Al-Kindi, and those who are upon their way. There's no such thing as what? Philosophers or Islamic philosophers. That doesn't exist. There's no such thing as Falasifatul Islam or Falasifatun or Filasuf Islamiyun. That does not exist. That does not exist. He says, if you intended by it where they come from or their nationality, meaning where they originated from as far as their country, and what they ascribe to, which is Islam, he said, in that case, okay, if they ascribe themselves to Islam, affirmation of what they ascribe to, that's correct. As for the example of Aqidah, then there's no distinction between the philosophers of the Greek philosophers and that what they're upon of so-called what? Philosophy, even though they ascribe themselves to the Muslims, or even though they ascribe themselves to what? Islam. Is it clear, everyone?
What do they mean by?
They call themselves Muslims. So openly they say we affiliate ourselves to what? The Muslims and Islam. But in actuality, they don't. Because what they're upon is absolute what? Misguidance, and Islam is absolutely what? Free from it. Islam rejects affairs of what? Philosophy. In regards to what? Now bringing it in affairs that is the most vital of them, which is your belief. Especially. Which is very dangerous. And what came, like we said, as a result of it, was all the deviant sects, where the majority or the vast Muslim countries now, currently, are affected by it to this very moment. Is it clear, everyone? Not realizing that all of these affairs stem from where? Greek philosophy. And those who adopted it, even though they said they were Muslim, such as Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi, and Ibn Farid, and other than them. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone?
Yes. What did he mean by your country? He mentioned something about if you...
He said the jinsiyah, the nationality. They emanate from Muslim countries. A lot of them were from Muslim countries. The jinsiyah, the nationality. So they emanate originally from where? Muslim countries. But what they're upon in belief is what? It's foreign. It's contrary to that. Something that had nothing to do with Islam, especially in our affairs connected with belief, which is the most important. And utilizing those affairs and those concepts, adopting them, and what comes, like we said, as a result of it, absolute misguidance, which is totally contradictory to what Allah Ta'ala intended for the creation as far as their foundations of belief. Is it clear, everyone?
No.
So that's what we mentioned it said. So now let's just read what Shaykh al-Islam says. Let's read it, the first paragraph. Now, everyone, when you read it, it should become clear. Tafadhal, Khalil.
No. At the bottom of 57.
We'll start from the beginning. So now when we read it, it should be clear.
Okay. And the reason behind this is their belief that these texts, for example, the Quran and Sunnah, do not point to the reality of any attribute based upon correct doubts which they share with their brethren.
Corrupt, not correct. Maybe it's because of the mass.
Yes, it's the mass.
Corrupt doubts. Those corrupt doubts are what, everyone? The intellect, the human mind. Venerating, glorifying the human mind. Giving precedence to it over what? Over the revelation. Over the revelation. So, their origin of their corrupt ideas stem from where? What we just mentioned. Is it clear?
Yes.
Jay, keep reading.
So because they believed Allah's attributes to be non-existent.
Who is he speaking about? Jahmiyyah. Ahsan. Now it's becoming clear. So now when you read the lines, everybody's scratching their head. I don't understand a word of this. Now you get the explanation. Now it's becoming what? Jay, tafadhal.
Along with the fact that these texts must carry a meaning, they waver between having belief, iman, in the attribute and claiming to entrust the knowledge of its meaning to Allah.
That's what we're going to discuss now. You'll find from the text, that's what we're going to speak about. Matter of fact, alhamdulillah, we already covered this. Remember I said a couple of lessons ago, especially of today, from Al-Asha'ira, they say, in regards to the names and attributes of Allah, we have to what? Do what they call tafweed. Entrust its what? Meanings. Entrust its meanings, entrust its kayfiyah, how it's done, and its true reality and its true essence. Entrust that to Allah. We do not know it, we don't affirm it, we entrust it to Allah. That's what they call tafweed. As we said last class, we said that tafweed breaks into two types. Tafweed in the Arabic language means entrustment. Entrustment of what? We said the tafweed of our belief is the tafweed of what? Of how Allah Ta'ala, as far as how it's done. How it's done, the kayfiyah, the true reality, the haqiqah, and the kun, and the true essence of it. Which is all the same, don't worry. I'm just giving you a little bit more information now. The reality, the true essence, and how it's done, all of that we entrusted to Allah. Except the what? Except the meaning. The meaning is affirmed. As soon as you hear the word, He will come on the day of resurrection. Clear. That Allah descends at night. Clear. Allah created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Then He ascended above. As soon as you clear it, clear. Especially when the preposition Upon comes after the verb ascension. There's no way you can twist it by saying, what? No, it doesn't mean ascension, it means domination. Why? Because the verb became what? Transitive by the preposition upon. So there's no meaning linguistically except that it means the word linguistically what? Ascension, meaning the actual action of ascension as far as the meaning of it, in which we affirm, in which we'll talk about. Don't ask me to repeat it. So what we just said, everyone, I just went a little fast, just to go fast for a second. But as far as in that regard, we're saying that those type of attributes, when you hear the word, Allah will come on the day of resurrection. Clear. That's what we affirm. We affirm for these names, what? These characteristics, its meaning. What we entrust to Allah is what? How Allah does it. We don't know. And it's way beyond our mental capacity. Is it right, everyone?
No.
Well, as far as in regards to what? Allah coming on the day of resurrection. Allah descending every night. And Allah, after He created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, then He ascended up what? When we hear it, we affirm, we believe in the meaning, it's clear. As far as the reality of it, the true essence of it, and how Allah does it, that's what we entrust to Allah. That's the tafweed, the entrustment of what? Ahl Sunnah. The tafweed of the people of bid'ah, which is what everyone? Entrusting what? They want to trust everything. The kayfiyah, how Allah does it. And this is the most evilest affairs. They said even the meaning. We entrust the meaning to Allah. There's nobody, even a basic child who's probably that's smart and intelligent after 4 or 5 years old, when they hear the word He's coming or He came or He will come, that's what they understand. It's clear. It's a no-brainer. Or that Allah descends. Or Allah descends every night to the lower part of the heaven every single night. When a child hears it, they understand descension. So when I want to make dua, I know my Lord has descended in that particular time, and I'm going to make dua here in order to what? Take advantage of my supplication being answered. Because I know the virtue of this particular time, because it says in the hadith clearly, Allah descends at the third part of the night. These are no-brainers. But just to let you know how ideologies can make things that are simple flip to something very what? So-called complicated, and to the point where it doesn't make absolutely any sense. And like we just refuted for the past 3 weeks, Shaykh al-Islam is basically refuting these concepts and saying, refuting these ideas, saying these are the most simple of affairs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made and clarified in His book. He gave us all these details in the branches, and you really think that the foundations would be obscure and confusing? It doesn't make any sense. That's why He was refuting them from this aspect. It doesn't make any sense that simple thing in regards to the branches of how to use the bathroom and how to have good business transactions and good commerce and dealings, and these affairs are clarified in detail, but the most greatest of all affairs are left the most confusing to comprehend. It's clear, everyone? Because Allah Ta'ala has infinite wisdom, that people have different levels of intelligence. And Allah Ta'ala wants everyone to understand the basic foundations of this religion. That's why it's considered the what? It's the most easiest. If one was to sit down and study, you'll find that the word Allah will come on the day of resurrection. Khalas, done. Now the Shaykh don't want to come with something complicated. No. This doesn't mean come. It means His command will come. No. It didn't mean He will come. It means rather His command or His angels will come. It's like, huh? You're making something extremely what? Confusing to the people. Doesn't make any sense. Is it clear, everyone? So that's what he's mentioning here. So that's what we said in regards to tafweed. So we have the tafweed of the people of Sunnah, which is what? Affirming what? Names, attributes, but entrusting Allah with what? The kayfiyah. Or entrusting Allah with the meaning? Jinn. The people of Ahl al-Batil, what do they do? The people of falsehood, what do they do? They entrust to what? Jinn. Keep reading for me, Khalil. Now you understand.
Okay. They waver between having belief in the attribute and claiming to entrust the knowledge of its meaning to Allah, which was tawfiq, which they erroneously claim to be the way of the Salaf, and between distorting the attribute to other meanings using somewhat burdensome methods.
Is it clear? Is it clear now? Is it clear, Mus'ab? So far, so good?
Right. And this is what they call the way of the Khalaf. As a result, this falsehood became a mixture of corrupt reasoning along with negation of the text. This is because in their negation of Allah's attributes, they relied upon intellectual arguments which they thought to be manifest proofs, but in reality were only doubts.
Exactly. So the Tariqat al-Salaf, they so-called claim, they saying that's the what? Tariqat al-Salaf, out of ignorance and lying upon the Salaf, they saying that the way that we need to do it, which is correct, which is to take the actual wording, twist it to another meaning, or other meanings by utilizing somewhat of overburdening ourselves by using or adding on to something else. As we just said that, we just gave examples of that a couple of minutes ago. And they'll call this that this is the methodology of the Khalaf. Of course, they, upon their belief, like we just mentioned last class, they believe that the Salaf were what? Aslam. The way of the Salaf was Aslam. We just covered this. No. And they say that Tariqat al-Khalaf was what? A'lam wa ahkam. The way of the Salaf was what? Safer. And the way of the Khalaf, meaning the later generation, or the scholars that came later, the methodology of the Khalaf was what? More knowledgeable and more what? Precise. All of that is absolute what? Nonsense. And it's a contradictory statement, as we mentioned. Right, everyone? So they say that the tariqah, the methodology of the Khalaf, as they, in their so-called rhetoric, or in their understanding, they're saying that this type of tafsir, meaning that we take the apparent meaning, and like we talked about, this is basically speaking about the Asha'ira, because they're the ones that do this. As for the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila, it's clear. They're done. They came with absolute clear misguidance. Like we're going to be, we're not going to trick you. We're coming with absolute misguidance, and we're not going to decorate it for you. Alhamdulillah, you say, Alhamdulillah for Allah clarifying your misguidance. So it doesn't tire us out as far as clarifying to the people your misguidance. The issue was where the Asha'ira. This was the issue. So Shaykh al-Islam had to come with a little bit more what? Method in order to pick out their misguidance so the people could be aware of their danger. Because a lot of people would think that, well, they're upon the Salaf, they affirm it in these particular characteristics. So what's the problem? They're Muslimun, we can say that they're Muslimun, and they say La ilaha illallah, and khalas, it's a done deal, done. And in actuality, they're upon what? Misguidance. So that's what he said. The Tariqat al-Khalaf, which, like he said, he's intending by this the Asha'ira. The Asha'ira. So the Asha'ira, this is their methodology, and this is their way. As we mentioned and said about that particular individual in this book entitled Jawharat al-Tawheed. We said by who, everyone? His name was Ibrahim al-Liqani, which is from the sources that the book, or the sources of, or the books or the sources that the Asha'ira rely upon, which is called Jawharat al-Tawheed, as they call it. Where they said that, for example, basically the text, if you find in the book of Allah, in the Quran, there are verses that indicate disbelief. That's basically what they're saying. And I have to stop here after this. There's text that what? There are texts and verses that if you was to read it, it insinuates disbelief. So when you hear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ascended, or Allah descended, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ascended, the open apparent meaning, if you was to take it just like that, the way it was mentioned in the book of Allah, that indicates that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resembles the creation. Resemblance to the creation, we know generally is what, everyone? Disbelief. To say that Allah's hand is like my hand, or Allah's face is like my face, or Allah's foot is like, or my shin is like my shin, generally that's what, everyone? It's disbelief. So basically what they're saying is there are verses in the book of Allah that insinuates what? That's what they're saying. Not realizing it. Hold on, everybody. It has to be an emergency. What the imams and what we have to do for our society is tell me, brothers, if people only know, if you guys only knew, the community, if you guys help us out by being more calm and collective and not quick to argue with your wives and your children, it would relieve a lot of us students of knowledge from a lot of headaches. Anyway, so what we were saying in this regard, what was I saying? قطع سلسلة تفكيري. حضرتك فكري الآن انقطع.
You said the verses.
No, just now remember. So he said that there were verses in the book of Allah that they say upon their claim that it insinuates what everyone? Disbelief. So the Asha'ira say we have to take another approach, which is what? Distortion. So now do you say these open verses, any person of common folk hear it, they must take a meaning of disbelief or some type of false notion or false meaning. So now let's take another approach. So let's resort to now what they call what? What? Distortion. So what did they fall into? They fell into what? The Asha'ira, what they so-called flee away from, they what? They fell into it. That's why they what? Distorted it, and that's why they what? Negated it. So what you fleeing away from, you fell into. And that's why I say with all of them, they come to my mind, and every time you say this to them, they go berserk. No, that's not true. Yes, it is true. The reason why you negated it, because you believe that it necessitates what? Resemblance of Allah of the creation. So what you fleed away from, you what? You fell into. That's why you what? Distorted it. You understand? So that is the issue. So that's what we're speaking about now. And that's where you'll find that what his name is Ibrahim al-Laqani in his book called Jawharat al-Tawheed. And there's other books the Asha'ira rely upon, like the Sharh of As-Sanusiyyah by Ibrahim al-Bayjuri. And other than that, don't worry about that right now. You'll find that they say, now listen to the poetry as we said last class, وَكُلُّ نَصٍ أَوْهَمَا تَشْبِيهًا أَوِّلْهُ أَوْفَوِّضْ وَرُمْ تَنْزِيهًا. They say that any text in the book of Allah, if it insinuates resemblance, they say, distort the meaning or entrust it and intend what you're doing by that, glorification of Allah. Is that correct? Is it correct or not when he said this poetry? فَأَيُّ نَصٍ أَوْهَمَ تَشْبِيهًا أَوِّلْهُ أَوْفَوِّضْ وَرُمْ تَنْزِيهًا. For any text that insinuates resemblance of Allah with the creation, distort the meaning or entrust it. And make your intention, what you're doing is what? Raising Allah above this. Is it correct? Absolutely not. Is it clear everyone? So that's what Shaykh al-Islam is speaking about here in this regard. So there's no text that insinuates what? Disbelief upon the claim of the Asha'ira until one has to resort to these type of methods in order to understand the verses that bring the names and attributes of Allah. Is it clear everyone? Because the name or so-called ta'wil, even though we'll talk about that in its due time, ta'wil, as we know, upon the meaning what the people falsehood who are the Asha'ira, it means to take the apparent meaning to a weak meaning by a so-called indication that we need to what? Resort to, or we need. That's the meaning of it. What's their qarina? What's their dalil? The dalil that agrees with the mind. It has to agree with the mind. So, the so-called mu'awwilin, it says, if I find a great imam, he goes on to say, وعند جميع المؤولين القرينة واحدة في تأويل الصفات وتأويل الصفات. في تأويل نصوص الصفات القرينة واحدة لا تتعدد وهي الاستحالة العقلية. الاستحالة العقلية. He said, what's the dalil indication that we have to now take the apparent meaning to a weak meaning by indication? This indication is the meaning of it is what everyone? The intellect, the mind. That all the people that now bring these distort meanings or they distort the meanings, their so-called qarina, or their so-called indication is one. Which is what everyone? What is impossible in the mind. What the mind doesn't agree with. It's impossible for our Lord to ascend. It's impossible for our Lord to what? Descend. That means that Allah, and if you listen to some of the statements of the Asha'ira of today, they say you believe Allah is above, so you mean to tell me my Lord sits? Subhanallah. I've heard someone of them say that back in the 90s. They said that. You mean to tell me my Lord sits on a chair? And you tell them, pause right there. What did you just do? Huh? You resemble the law of the creation. That's why you fell into what? Denying it. And Shaykh al-Islam brings in so many other works, proving that there are things that are above the heavens that don't need anything to recline upon, even though it's above. He said that's from the creation that Allah created, that hovers and is above, and it doesn't need anything to hover and be above. He said, if you believe that and affirm that for some of the creation, how do you think that our Lord cannot be above something and be at the same time be free and independent of it? Is it clear, everyone?
No.
We'll talk about that as it goes on the book, inshallah. But for right now, we'll stop here. So I think something just happened. I got to attend to it. We'll stop here. Any questions?
Do you think that they fell into imitating the Greeks because of the proximity of where they were living at the time?
That was one of the reasons. That was one of the reasons. There was a couple of other reasons I'm trying to recall. I think because a lot of Islam was spreading, and a lot of those books were in the hands of the kuffar that were residing in those countries before the Muslims took it over. So those were other reasons why it became adopted within the ranks of the Muslims and brought into their lands. Because of some of the people who became Muslim were foreigners. They were foreigners, and they had their books already. Especially those were the two dominant countries at that time. They were the two dominant nations at that time. It was Persia and Rome. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that in his book. غُلِبَتِ الرُّوم. It's a surah. Surah Rum. Surah, it's the Quran. The surah of Rome. And it's the first ayat is what, everyone? Rome has been defeated. غُلِبَتِ الرُّوم. But anyway, the two nations is what? Is at that particular time, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, were the Persians and the who? And the Romans. And they both were brought down by the Muslims. That to this day that the non-Muslims hide. They hide that. They hide it under the dirt. Because they know that the people really in history knew that about the Muslims. They knew the dominance and the power that they had. How the Muslims brought down Rome and Persia is like similar to how people that lived in a farmland had brought down Russia and China. The two great powers of this dunya right now, as far as in regards to especially China. Can you imagine some people that was in a land that started in a specific city, they grew so powerful until they brought down one of the greatest nations in the dunya. That's how the level was, the magnitude, what the Muslims did in regards to Rome and Persia. Similar to Russia and China. The Muslims brought them down. And to this day, the kuffar, they hide it. They're like, no, we ain't gonna tell the people that. Keep that hidden. That's why they never speak about it. Is it clear, everyone? Yeah. Talk about it, but that's one of the reasons that's caused, because they probably, like I said, the occupancy of the Romans and the Persians and the Muslims took it over is probably why they adopted a lot of their books and a lot of their ways. Allahu A'lam. There's other reasons, but I just can't remember right now. Anything else, anyone? Fadl.
You mentioned something about the Jahmiyyah not being counted as believers. Now, would that necessitate that they're outside of the 73 sects?
Yeah, generally, absolutely. Absolutely. The thing is that I have to find, there are riwayat that Imam Ahmed declared their heads to be kuffar. But from the common folk, he didn't make takfir on. Because some people would say that, well, we have statements that Imam Ahmed said that he didn't declare people who are upon the way to Jahmiyyah kuffar. No, if you look to the text, Imam Ahmed declared the heads to be kuffar. But he said but he was reluctant in regards to the common folk. And that's what I read. But the shahid, or the point of reference, is that he declared the heads to be what? Kuffar. He said the heads were, the leaders, the callers, he said they were kuffar, the Jahmiyyah. Anything else? Anything else? Tafadhal, Muhammad.
Just a quick point, like when Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah mentioned that their brothers from disbelievers, and then that silsila that we mentioned from Ja'd ibn Dirham to Talut to Labib now, it goes back to the Yahud. Till this day, they actually have that same belief of of Allah not having no attributes at all. I actually watched a video of the brother Shamsi. He was having an argument with one of them in Hyde Park, and the same thing that Shaykh Islam just mentioned, they just regurgitated. Well, no matter what just the same way as the Mu'tazila or the Jahmiyyah, you gave them an attribute. They said no, you cannot accept it.
The more likely is probably negated with somebody from the Rawafid and Shia, because the Rawafid and Shia are upon the Aqidah of the Mu'tazila.
No, this is the Yahudi.
Oh, it's Yahudi.
Yeah, Yahudi. That's right.
Oh, now I understand.
Yeah, I meant to say the Yahudi. They hold the same belief.
Subhanallah.
It goes back to Nabi. To this day,
They still believe that.
They still believe that.
La ilaha illallah. Look at that. Ahsan. That was a fact. I didn't know that. Jazakallah khairan. Man, that just agrees with what we just mentioned. How the Yahud, they don't affirm that.
They don't at all.
And to the point where all of that, majority of the deviant sects in Islam were all started by the Jews. And they're started by deep people of disbelief. All of them. Even Sufi, if you go back to its origins. It's paganistic backgrounds, paganistic origins, even with the Sufis. Grave worshipping goes back to the Rawafid. The Rawafid got those concepts from the Jews and the Christians. Grave worshipping, all that stuff stemmed from them. And then Muslims tried to adopt it. Everything. All the deviant sects, majority, if not all of them, from what I'm on, even the Khawarij, the origin was started by the Yahudi. Abdullah ibn Saba al-Yahudi. All of it. Even the Qadariyya, same thing. Goes back to the Kuffar, when it goes after ideologies of a person who's a Christian. Susan. Susan, that's what Ma'bad al-Juhani and the Mishbiyah took it from an individual named Susan. We'll talk about that later. Anything else? We'll stop here. Sallallahu وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك